The wind carried ash instead of rain these days. Dane Winters pulled his weathered coat tighter as he surveyed what remained of the highland pastures. 3 years since the sky had split open with fire and foreign metal, and still the earth refused to fully heal. Brown patches scarred the hillsides where grass should have grown thick and green. His flock had dwindled to 17 sheep, down from nearly 200. Most had been vaporized in the first strikes. Others had starved when the crops failed. These survivors were stubborn creatures, much like Dane himself, too ornery to die when the world said they should. He knelt beside the creek that bisected his property, cupping water in his calloused hands. The stream still ran clear, fed by mountain springs the invaders hadn't found yet. Small mercies. He filled his leather canteen slowly, methodically, the way his grandfather had taught him. Waste nothing. Appreciate everything. The hum started low, a vibration in his chest before his ears caught it. Dane didn't run. Running was pointless when they wanted you. He'd learned that watching his neighbors flee, only to be reduced to ash mid-stride. Instead, he stood, turned, waited. The ship descended like a predator dropping from a great height, all sleek edges and gleaming hull. Smaller than the city killers, but large enough to carry a full squad. The landing gear extended with mechanical precision. Crushing what remained of his northern fence, they emerged in formation. 7 warriors in armor that seemed to drink in the afternoon light, pulse rifles held ready, visors gleaming, and then she stepped out. Even among her kind, Severa was striking. Taller than Dane by a hand's width, she moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. Her armor was deep, violet, almost black in the shadows, with silver accents that traced the plates protecting her form. Unlike her soldiers' full helmets, hers left her face exposed, revealing features that were simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. Sharp cheekbones, skin the color of twilight, and eyes that burned like molten copper. Human, she said, her voice carrying easily across the distance. The universal translator rendered her words in flat, emotionless English. This territory is now property of the Zephyrian Empire. You are in violation of occupation protocols. Dane studied her for a long moment. Her hand rested on the weapon at her hip, but she hadn't drawn it. Her soldiers maintained their formation, but hadn't advanced. There was a protocol to this, he realized. A dance they expected him to know. This is my land, he said simply. Has been for 6 generations. Severa's eyes narrowed. Your concept of ownership is irrelevant. The Empire claims all resources on this world. You will comply or be eliminated. Expected fear. Dane could see it in the subtle tension of her posture, the way her soldiers shifted weight in anticipation of his panic. Instead, he turned back to the creek, unstopped his canteen, and filled a second container he kept for the sheep. Thirsty? He asked, holding the smaller flask toward her. The reaction was immediate. Her soldiers raised their rifles. Severa's hand moved to her weapon, eyes widening, but she didn't draw. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. What? She said slowly. Do you think you're doing? Offering you water, Dane replied, keeping his voice level. It's a warm day. You've traveled far, I'd imagine. Severa stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. You offer me water. Your world is conquered. Your species is scheduled for processing. And you offer me water? Seems the polite thing to do. Her copper eyes searched his face, looking for the trap, the hidden weapon, the suicide vest. Dane simply stood there, arm extended, the flask catching the sunlight. This is some kind of trick, she said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. No trick. Dane shrugged. Just water. Take it or don't. He could see the war happening behind her eyes. Every instinct, every bit of training told her this was wrong. Humans didn't offer kindness to their conquerors. They fought or fled or begged. They didn't stand in burned pastures. Offering refreshment like this was a social call. Slowly.
Oh.
Deliberately, Severa reached for the flask. Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and Dane noticed her hand was warm, not cold as he'd expected. She examined the container, likely scanning it for toxins or explosives. Finding none, She brought it to her lips and drank. Her expression shifted. Surprise flickered across her features before she could suppress it. She drank again, longer this time, then lowered the flask. "It's clean," she said, as if the concept confused her. "Mountain spring? Best water in the highlands." Dane gestured to the creek. "Help yourself to more if you want." Severa returned the flask, her movements slower now, less aggressive. "Why?" The single word carried genuine confusion. "We destroyed your cities. Killed millions of your kind. We are your enemy." Dane took the flask and drank from it himself, the same place her lips had touched. When he lowered it, he met her burning gaze steadily. "My grandfather used to say that hospitality costs nothing, but its absence costs everything. You're here now, standing on my land, drinking my water. That makes you a guest, whether either of us planned it or not." "I am not a guest," Severa said, but the conviction in her voice had wavered. "I am a conqueror. Suit yourself." Dane turned back to his sheep, who'd clustered nervously at the far end of the pasture. "But the offer stands." He walked away from her, from the armed soldiers, from the ship that could vaporize him with a thought. Every step expected to be his last. But the shot never came. Behind him, Severa stood frozen, the empty flask still in her hand. Staring at the human who'd treated her invasion like an unexpected visit from a neighbor. Something in her chest tightened, an unfamiliar sensation she couldn't name. "Hold position," she ordered her squad, her voice rough. "I'm conducting a preliminary assessment." As Dane reached his flock, he glanced back. Severa was still watching him, her expression no longer cold and certain. For the first time in 3 years of occupation, she looked uncertain, and somehow that felt like a small victory. The sun had begun its descent toward the western peaks when Severa finally moved from her position. Her squad had set up a perimeter around the shepherd's property, their equipment humming with the low frequency that made human ears ache. Dane had ignored them, focusing instead on guiding his sheep toward the shelter. He'd built from salvaged timber and stone. Torin approached her with the cautious respect of someone who'd served under Severa for 5 campaigns. His armor bore the marks of countless battles, and his face, visible through his retracted visor, showed the weathered purple skin of a career soldier. "Officer Severa," he said quietly, using her rank rather than her name. A subtle reminder of protocol. "The sector scan is complete. This human appears to be the only one within a 15-mile radius. The rest either evacuated or perished in the initial strikes." "Noted," Severa replied, her eyes still tracking Dane's movements as he checked each sheep with gentle hands, examining hooves and coats with practiced efficiency. "The extraction teams are waiting for clearance," Torin continued. "They can be here within the hour to begin resource processing. The water source alone would know." Torin blinked. "Officer." I said no. "Not yet." Severa turned to face him fully. "This human has demonstrated unusual behavior. I want 24 hours to study it before we proceed." "Study it." Torin's confusion was evident. "Officer, with respect, we've cataloged thousands of humans. Their psychology is well documented. Desperate, emotional, prone to irrational. This one offered me water." Torin. The silence that followed was heavy. Torin's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "It what?" "You heard me correctly? After I announced the Empire's claim, after I threatened elimination, it offered me water. Unprompted, unafraid." Torin's hand moved unconsciously toward his weapon. "It could be diseased, mentally compromised. Some kind of psychological warfare tactic we haven't encountered. I've considered that." Severa looked back toward Dane, who was now filling troughs with water from the creek, but his vitals showed no abnormalities. No elevated stress hormones, no signs of neurological damage. He was simply hospitable. Hospitable. Torin repeated the word like it tasted wrong. "Officer Severa, I've served with you since the Kranat campaign. I've never questioned your judgment. But this is highly irregular. High Sentinel Corvin will want reports. If we delay extraction without clear strategic reasoning, then I'll provide reasoning," Severa interrupted. "Understanding anomalous behavior in conquered populations could prove valuable for future campaigns." If this human represents a psychological pattern we've missed, that's intelligence worth gathering. It was a thin justification, and they both knew it. Torrance studied her face for a long moment before nodding slowly. 24 hours. But I'm filing the delay with command. Standard protocol. Do what you must. After Torrin returned to the perimeter, Severa found herself walking toward the shelter where Dane had disappeared. The structure was crude by Zephyrian standards, but solid. Functional. Built to last despite limited resources, she found him inside, arranging feed for the animals. The space was small, forcing them into closer proximity than either had maintained before. Dane looked up at her approach but didn't stop working. Your soldiers are efficient, he said, conversational. Had the whole perimeter up in under an hour. Impressive. We are trained for rapid deployment, Severa replied automatically, then caught herself. Why was she explaining military doctrine to a conquered human? Must be exhausting, all that conquering. Dane scattered grain with practiced motions. Never getting to just be somewhere. Always moving to the next target. Now, the Empire's expansion is necessary for survival. Resources are finite, so you take hours. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Yes. Dane nodded slowly, finishing his task. He turned to face her fully, and Severa was struck again by his eyes. Deep brown, almost black in the dim light, holding a steadiness that shouldn't exist in someone whose world had ended. You got a name? He asked. Or do you just go by Conqueror? Severa, she found herself saying. Officer Severa, of the Zephyrian Empire's Third Fleet. Dane. Just Dane. Don't have much use for titles when you're the only one left to care about them. He moved past her toward the door, and she caught the scent of hemirth and wool, sweat and something else. Something organic and alive that was absent from the recycled air of her ship. It was strangely not unpleasant. He could have run, she said to his back. When you heard the ship, most humans run. Dane paused in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. Where would I run to? The whole planet's conquered, you said. Besides, the sheep need tending. Can't do that if I'm scattered across the hillside in a million pieces. You value these animals above your own life? I value keeping my word. He glanced back at her. Promised my sister I'd take care of them before the second wave? Some promises you keep even when everything else is gone? The tightness in Severa's chest returned. She'd overseen the second wave. Had sat in the tactical center, watching cities burn, calculating acceptable losses, maximizing efficiency. How many siblings had she separated? How many promises had she destroyed? I should return to my post, she said, her voice rougher than intended. Suit yourself. But there's stew cooking over the fire pit outside if you get hungry. Just rabbit and wild tubers, but it's warm. He left her standing in the shelter, surrounded by the quiet sounds of sheep settling for the night. Through the gaps in the walls, she watched him build up the fire, hang a battered pot over the flames, move with the unhurried grace of someone performing a ritual done 1,000 times before. Severa's communicator buzzed. Torrin's voice crackled through. Officer, we're detecting movement 5 miles east. Might be another survivor. Her training kicked in immediately. Maintain observation. Prepare containment protocols if it approaches this location. Understood. Also, you should know the human has visitors. Severa stepped outside to see an old man limping up the hillside, leaning heavily on a gnarled walking stick. His face was a map of wrinkles, skin weathered by decades under this planet's sun. He stopped when he saw the Zephyrian soldiers, his expression hardening. Marcus, Dane called out, waving the old man forward. It's all right? They're not shooting today. Not shooting yet, Marcus corrected, his eyes never leaving Severa. He reached Dane's side and the two men clasped forearms in greeting. Saw the ship from my cave. Came to see if you were still breathing. Still breathing. Still shepherding, Dane gestured to Severa. This is Officer Severa. She's assessing the situation. Is that what they call it now? Marcus's voice dripped with bitterness. My granddaughter was assessed right into a processing center. Haven't heard from her in 2 years? Severa felt the accusation like a physical blow, but kept her expression neutral. Processing centers ensure efficient resource allocation and population management. Population management, Marcus spat. Pretty words for slavery, Marcus Dane said quietly, a gentle warning in his tone. Don't Marcus me, boy. You're breaking bread with the enemy. Offering them water like this is some kind of social call. Have you forgotten what they've done? I haven't forgotten anything. Dane's voice remained calm but firm. But I haven't forgotten who I am either. What we were before they came. We were better than hate, better than revenge. My sister believed that. My parents believed that, and they're all dead because of it. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackling fire. Severa watched something painful cross Dane's face, quickly suppressed. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Yeah, they are. But that doesn't change what's right. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head. You're a fool, Dane Winters. A kind fool, which is the worst kind to be. He turned his glare on Severa. And you. Whatever game you're playing with him, whatever intelligence you're gathering, just know that some of us haven't forgotten. Some of us never will. He limped back down the hillside, disappearing into the gathering dusk. Dane watched him go, then returned to tending the stew, his movements mechanical. He's not wrong, Severa said quietly. Your kindness is foolish. It changes nothing. Dane stirred the pot, the wooden spoon scraping against metal. Maybe, but maybe changing nothing is better than becoming nothing. My grandfather used to say that the moment you let your enemies make you cruel is the moment they've truly conquered you. We have already conquered you. Your planet, your resources, your future, all belong to the Empire. My planet, sure. My resources, maybe. Dane looked up at her, firelight dancing in his eyes. But my humanity? That's mine, until I choose to give it up. And I'm choosing not to. Severa had no response to that. She returned to her squad, ordered a watch rotation, and tried to focus on her reports. But her eyes kept drifting back to the solitary figure by the fire. To the man who'd offered water to his destroyer and called it the right thing to do. As night fell completely, Dane banked the fire and retired to his shelter. Severa stood at the perimeter, looking up at the unfamiliar stars of this conquered world, and felt something she hadn't experienced in all her years of service. Doubt the next morning would bring. High Sentinel Corvin. Bringing questions she wasn't sure she could answer, but for now, in the quiet darkness, she allowed herself to wonder, what if the humans weren't the primitive ones? What if she was?